Greta Thunberg. Greta Tintin Eleanor Erman Thunberg, Swedish. Listen, born 3 January 2003, is a Swedish environmental activist who is known for challenging world leaders to take immediate action for climate change mitigation. Swedish environmental activist born 2003, Thunberg's activism began when she persuaded her parents to adopt lifestyle choices that reduced their own carbon footprint. In August 2018, at age 15, she started spending her Fridays outside the Swedish parliament to call for stronger action on climate change by holding up a sign reading "Schoolstrike for Climate, School Strike for Climate." Thunberg initially gained notice for her youth and her straightforward and blunt speaking manner, both in public and to political leaders and assemblies, in which she criticizes world leaders for their failure to take what she considers sufficient action to address the climate crisis. Soon other students engaged in similar protests in their own communities. Together they organized a school climate strike movement under the name Fridays for Future. After Thunberg addressed the 2018 United Nations Climate Change Conference, student strikes took place every week somewhere in the world. In 2019, there were multiple coordinated multi-city protests involving over 1 million students each to avoid carbon-intensive flying. Thunberg sailed in a yacht to North America, where she attended the 2019 UN Climate Action Summit. Her speech there, in which she exclaimed "How dare you!" was widely taken up by the press and incorporated into music. She speaks fluent English, and most of her public interactions are in English. Her sudden rise to world fame made her both a leader in the activist community and a target for critics, especially due to her youth. Her influence on the world stage has been described by The Guardian and other newspapers as the Greta Effect. She received numerous honors and awards, including an honorary fellowship of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society, inclusion in Time's 100 Most Influential People, being the youngest Time Person of the Year, inclusion in the Forbes list of the world's 100 most powerful women 2019, and nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Position on climate change. A video of Thunberg speaking at the 2019 World Economic Forum in Davos. Thunberg delivering a speech at a July 2019 school strike for climate change in Berlin. Thunberg asserts that humanity is facing an existential crisis because of global warming and holds the current generation of adults responsible for creating the problem. She uses graphic analogies, such as "Our house is on fire," to highlight her concerns, and often speaks bluntly to business and political leaders about their failure to take concerted action. Thunberg has said that climate change will have a disproportionate effect on young people, whose futures will be profoundly affected. She argues that her generation may not have a future anymore because that future was sold so that a small number of people could make unimaginable amounts of money. She also has said that people in the global south will suffer most from climate change, even though they have contributed least in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. Thunberg has voiced support for other young activists from developing countries who are already facing the damaging effects of climate change. Speaking in Madrid in December 2019, she said, "We talk about our future, they talk about their present." Speaking at international forums, she berates world leaders because too little action is being taken to reduce global emissions. She says that lowering emissions is not enough, that emissions need to be reduced to zero if the world is to keep global warming to less than 1.5 C. Speaking to the British Parliament in April 2019, she said, "The fact that we are speaking of lowering instead of stopping emissions is perhaps the greatest force behind the continuing business as usual in order to take the necessary action." She added that politicians should not listen to her, they should listen to what the scientists are saying about how to address the crisis. According to political scientists Mattia Zulianolo and Diego Sexabelli, Thunberg's ideas can be defined as technocratic ecocentrism, which is grounded on the exaltation of the vox scientifica. More specifically, Thunberg has argued that commitments made at the Paris Agreement are insufficient to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, and that the greenhouse gas emissions curve needs to start declining steeply no later than is detailed in the just 2018 Special Report on Global Warming of 1.5 C. In February 2019, at a conference of the European Economic and Social Committee, She said that the EU's current intention to cut emissions by % by 2030 is not sufficient to protect the future for children growing up today, and that the EU must reduce their co-emissions by % double the % goal. Thunberg reiterated her views on political inaction in a November 2020 interview where she stated that leaders are happy to set targets for decades ahead, but flinch when immediate action is needed. She criticized the European Green Deal, which aims to make the EU climate neutral by 2050, saying that it sends a strong signal that real and sufficient action is being taken when in fact it's not. Nature doesn't bargain, and you cannot make deals with physics. In an interview shortly before the 2021 COP conference in Glasgow, Thunberg, asked how optimistic she was that the conference could achieve anything, responded, "Nothing has changed from previous years. Really, the leaders will say, we'll do this and we'll do this, and we will put our forces together and achieve this, and then they will do nothing. Maybe some symbolic things and creative accounting and things that don't really have a big impact. We can have as many COPs as we want, but nothing real will come out of it." She called Chinese President Xi Jinping a leader of a dictatorship and said that democracy is the only solution to the climate crisis, since the only thing that could get us out of this situation is massive public pressure. In 30 October 2021, she arrived at Glasgow Central Station for the COP. She spoke at some protests during the COP and marched in a Fridays for Future Scotland climate strike on Friday, 5 November. She said in an earlier interview that the public needed to uproot the system. She delivered a speech to protesters in which she described COP as a failure, speaking of blah 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 and greenwashing. Public response and impact. Thunberg has received both strong support and strong criticism for her work from politicians and the press, reflecting the difficulties encountered by leading environmental and scientific voices to be heard in the corridors in power. Thunberg has met with many politicians and world leaders, but said that she could not think of a single politician who has impressed her. Asked about New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who described the climate crisis as a matter of life or death, Thunberg commented, "It's funny that people believe Jacinda Ardern and people like that are climate leaders. That just tells you how little people know about the climate crisis." Thunberg ignores words and sentiments. Obviously, the emissions haven't fallen. It goes without saying that these people are not doing anything. In fact, New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions had increased by a percentage in February 2019. 224 academics signed an open letter of support stating they were inspired by Thunberg's actions and the striking school children in making their voices heard. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres endorsed the school strikes initiated by Thunberg, admitting, "My generation has failed to respond properly to the dramatic challenge of climate change. This is deeply felt by young people. No wonder they are angry." Speaking at an event in New Zealand in May 2019, Guterres said his generation was not winning the battle against climate change and that it was up to the youth to rescue the planet. Thunberg urges MEPs to show climate leadership. Democratic candidates for the 2020 United States presidential election, such as Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, and Bernie Sanders, expressed support after her speech at the September 2019 Action Summit in New York. German Chancellor Angela Merkel indicated that young activists such as Thunberg had driven her government to act faster on climate change. Thunberg and her campaign have been criticized by politicians as well, ranging from personal attacks to statements that she oversimplifies the complex issues involved. Among them are the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President Emmanuel Macron, Russian President Vladimir Putin, OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and repeatedly by U.S. President Donald Trump. In September 2019, Trump shared a video of Thunberg angrily addressing world leaders, along with her quote that people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing, we are in the beginning of a mass extinction, Trump wrote about Thunberg, tweeting, "She seems like a very happy young girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future. So nice to see." Thunberg reacted by changing her Twitter bio to match his description and stating that she could not understand why grown-ups would choose to mock children and teenagers for just communicating and acting on the science when they could do something good instead. In December 2019, President Trump again mocked Thunberg after she was named Person of the Year for 2019 by Time, tweeting, "So ridiculous. Greta must work on her anger management problem, then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. Chill, Greta, chill. Thunberg responded by changing her Twitter biography to a teenager working on her anger management problem, currently chilling and watching a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. During the 2020 United States presidential election, Thunberg commented on Trump tweeting "STOPTHECOUNT" with the text, "So ridiculous. Donald must work on his anger management problem, then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend." Chill, Donald, chill. In October 2019, Putin described Thunberg as a kind girl and very sincere, while suggesting she was being manipulated to serve others' interests. Putin criticized her as poorly informed, adding, "No one has explained to Greta that the modern world is complex and different, and people in Africa or in many Asian countries want to live at the same wealth level as in Sweden." Similar to her reaction to Trump, Thunberg updated her Twitter bio to reflect Putin's description of her. In December 2019, Thunberg tweeted, "Indigenous people are literally being murdered for trying to protect the forest from illegal deforestation." Over and over again, it is shameful that the world remains silent about this. When asked about this subject 2 days later, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro responded, "Greta said that the Indians were dying because they were trying to protect the Amazon. It is impressive how the press gives voice to such a brat." On the same day, Thunberg changed her Twitter description to piranha, the Portuguese word for brat used by Bolsonaro in a May 2019 interview with Sue Haynes in Time. Thunberg addressed the criticism she has received online, saying, "It's quite hilarious when the only thing people can do is mock you or talk about your appearance or personality, as it means they have no argument or nothing else to say." Former U.S. Vice President and Trump's eventual successor Joe Biden responded to President Trump's tweet mocking Thunberg after she was named the Times Person of the Year 2019 by tweeting at Trump, "What kind of president bullies a teenager? Real Donald Trump." You could learn a few things from Greta on what it means to be a leader in 30 March 2021. European Commissioner for Climate Action Frans Timmermans said in a tweet after talking to Thunberg that the Commission remains committed to making the Common Agricultural Policy fulfill the objectives of the European Green Deal. In August 2019, Scott Walsman wrote in Scientific American that Thunberg's detractors have launched personal attacks, bash autism, and increasingly rely on ad hominem attacks to blunt her influence. Writing in The Guardian, Aditya Chakraborty said that columnists, including Brendan O'Neill, Toby Young, the blog Guido Fawkes, as well as Helen Dale and Rod Little at The Spectator and The Sunday Times, had been making ugly personal attacks on Thunberg. British TV presenter Piers Morgan also mocked Thunberg as part of its climate change denial. Germany's right-wing populist party Alternative for Germany AfD has attacked Thunberg in fairly vicious ways, according to Jacob Gull, a researcher for the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. And Banks' Twitter post saying that freak yachting accidents do happen in August outraged a number of British Member of Parliament, celebrities, and academics. Tanja Boltman, founder of EU Citizens Champion, said Banks had invoked the drowning of a child for his own amusement and said that most of those attacking Thunberg are white middle-aged men from the right of the political spectrum. Writing in The Guardian, Gabby Hinsliff said Thunberg has become the new front in the Brexit culture war, arguing that the outrage generated by personal attacks on Thunberg by Brexiters gives them the welcome oxygen of publicity. In September 2019, Nick Gillespie wrote in Reason that Greta Thunberg's histrionics are likely heartfelt, but neither they nor the deplorable responses they conjure are a guide forward to good environmental policy in a world that is getting richer every day. In August 2021, Yasmin Surin wrote in The Atlantic that Thunberg had become the target of a barrage of disinformation and conspiracies from the far right and populist right, including depictions of her as a spoiled child, a leftist pawn, and even a Nazi. September 2019 climate strike in Geneva. Thunberg has inspired a number of her school-aged peers in what has been described as the Greta effect in response to her outspoken stance. Various politicians have also acknowledged the need to focus on climate change. Britain's Secretary for the Environment, Michael Gove, said, "When I listened to you, I felt great admiration, but also responsibility and guilt. I am of your parents' generation, and I recognize that we haven't done nearly enough to address climate change and the broader environmental crisis that we helped to create." Labour politician Ed Miliband, who is responsible for introducing the Climate Change Act 2008, said, "You have woken us up, haven't you? All the young people who have gone on strike have held up a mirror to our society. You have taught us all a really important lesson. You have stood out from the crowd." Beginning in early 2019, roughly concurrent with growing public recognition of Thunberg's work, Google Trends data shows a growth in searches for the term climate emergency shown in red and for the term climate crisis shown in blue. The surge in 2006 followed release of Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth in February 2019. Thunberg shared a stage with the then president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, where he outlined, in the next financial period from 2021 to 2027, every fourth euro spent within the EU budget will go towards action to mitigate climate change. Climate issues also played a significant role in European Parliament election in May 2019, as Green parties recorded their best ever results, boosting their MEP seat numbers from 52 to 72. Many of the gains came from northern European countries where young people have taken to the streets inspired by Thunberg. In June 2019, a YouGov poll in Britain found that public concern about the environment had soared to record levels in the UK since Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion had pierced the bubble of denial. In August 2019, publication and sales of children's books about the climate crisis reportedly doubled compared to the previous year. Publishers attribute this to the Greta effect. Inspired by Thunberg, wealthy philanthropists and investors from the United States have donated about $600,000 to support Extinction Rebellion and school strike groups to establish the Climate Emergency Fund. Trevor Nielsen, one of the philanthropists, said the three founders would be contacting friends among the global mega-rich to donate 100 times more in the weeks and months ahead. In December 2019, the New Scientist described the impact made by Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion with the headline, "The Year the World Woke Up to Climate Change." According to a 2021 study, those who are more familiar with Greta Thunberg have higher intentions of taking collective actions to reduce global warming and that stronger collective efficacy beliefs mediate this relationship. This association between familiarity with Greta Thunberg, collective efficacy beliefs, and collective action intentions is present even after accounting for respondents' overall support for climate activism. Thunberg has spearheaded the anti-flying movement, promoting rail travel over flying on environmental grounds. The buzzword associated with this movement is flygskam or flight shame. It is a phenomenon in which people feel social pressure not to fly because of the rising greenhouse gas emissions of the airline industry. It was originally championed by Swedish Olympic athlete Björn Ferry, but has gained significant momentum after Thunberg's refusal to fly on environmental grounds. Thunberg backed the campaign to fly less and made it part of her 2019 awareness tour in Europe. Sweden reported a percentage drop in domestic air travel for 2019 and an increase in rail use. The BBC says that the movement could have the growth of global air travel, but Airbus and Boeing say that they still expect to grow at around a percentage until 2035. In June 2019, Swedish Railways SJ reported that the number of Swedes taking the train for domestic journeys had risen by a percentage from the previous year, reflecting growing public concern reflected in a survey published by the Swedish Railways about the impact of flying on co-emissions. A sticker was handed out by Excite Energy Services of Alberta, Canada, with the company's name on it with an image of a man grabbing the braids of a girl while raping her from behind and the word Greta on the image. Then 17-year-old Greta Thunberg posted about it on Twitter. "They are starting to get more and more desperate. This shows that we're winning." Although the general manager of Excite initially said that neither Excite nor any Excite employee was involved in making the sticker, Excite Energy later apologized, admitting that they have distributed it and are assuming full responsibility. The letter asserted that they were destroying known extant copies and making organizational changes to prevent future incidents. In popular culture and art, Thunberg has been depicted in popular culture and art. Greta and the Giants, a book by Zoe Tucker and Zoe Persico, published by Francis Lincoln Children's Books, was inspired by the life of Thunberg. Argentinian artist Andres Iglesias unveiled an 18-meter mural of Thunberg above Mason Street, near Union Square in San Francisco. American painter Elizabeth Peyton chose her 2019 portrait Greta Thunberg as the leading image of one of her shows. She has been depicted in multiple murals. In Bristol, a 15-meter-high 49-foot mural of Thunberg by artist Jodie Thomas portrays the bottom half of her face as if under rising seawater. Since May 2019, Thunberg was featured on the Time magazine cover in May 2019 issue, where she was described as a role model and one of the next generation leaders. She and 15 others were featured on the cover of the fashion magazine Vogue, created by guest editor Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, in September. Some of Thunberg's speeches have been incorporated into music. In 2019, Thunberg contributed a voiceover for a release of the 1975, a song by the English band by the same name. Thunberg finishes the song by urging, "So, everyone out there, it is now time for civil disobedience. It is time to rebel." Proceeds will go to Extinction Rebellion at Thunberg's request. In September 2019, John Meredith set her UN Action Summit speech to death metal. The Australian musician Megan Washington and composer Robert Davidson used the same "How Dare You" speech for a performance at an event exploring the future of music. DJ Fatboy Slim created a mashup of the speech with his dance hit Right Here, Right Now, Make the World Great Again is a 30-minute documentary released by Vice featuring interviews with a number of youth protest leaders in Europe and showing the run-up to the March 2019 global climate protests. In 2019, Thunberg collaborated with the climate charity Project Pressure on an art piece projected onto the UN building in New York in the lead-up to the UN Climate Action Summit, featuring the voices of 6 young activists, including Thunberg herself. Visualist by Joseph Michael, authored by Klaus Beiman, and music by Brian Eno. Their commentary was on the climate crisis and the urgent actions that need to be taken to minimize its consequences. Project Pressure Voices for the Future. In January 2020, Thunberg said that she had filed to trademark her name, the name Fridays for Future, and Skullstrick for Climate to protect her movement from commercial interests. She says she has no interest in trademarks, but it needs to be done because her name and movement were constantly being used for commercial purposes without consent. In May 2020, Thunberg was featured in Pearl Jam's music video Retrograde. She appears as a fortune teller, with images in her crystal ball depicting startling effects of climate change in numerous countries. In September 2020, the Hulu Cineverse-esque documentary I Am Greta had its world premiere at the Venice Film Festival. The film was directed by Nathan Grossman, who single-handedly operated the camera and sound equipment while memorializing Thunberg's climate activism from the first solitary days of her school strike in August 2018, all the way through to her 2-week sea voyage across the Atlantic to attend the United Nations Climate Summit in September 2019. Following its Venice premiere, the film had its North American premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on 11 September 2020. And opened in cinemas across Europe, North America, and Australia in October. Hulu began streaming I Am Greta in the United States in November. In March 2021, the University of Winchester installed a life-size sculpture of Thunberg on its campus. of Studios made a 3-part series, Greta Thunberg, A Year to Change the World, with planned visits to various countries omitted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Production was announced in February 2020. And the series was broadcast in April 2021. Works: Scenes from the Heart 2018, with her sister, father and mother Thunberg, Greta 2019, No One is Too Small to Make a Difference. Penguin Books, ISBN 978-0-241-51457. 457-3, OCLC 1,196,840,691, 96 pages, a collection of Thunberg's climate action speeches, with the earnings being donated to charity. Greta Thunberg speeches and interviews, What Would Greta Do?, archived from the original on 6 April 2020, an archived compilation of Thunberg's speeches and interviews, and IPCC reports, up to March. Thunberg, Greta November 2019, The Disarming Case to Act Right Now on Climate Change. Stockholm, Sweden. Ernman, Malina, Thunberg, Greta, Ernman, Beata, Thunberg, Svant 2021, Our House is on Fire, Scenes of a Family and a Planet in Crisis. Penguin Books, ISBN 978-014-199,288-4, OCLC 1,179,047,026, 288 page. S. Thunberg, Greta, Calderon, Adriana, Hume, Fars Nafarak, Njugana, Eric, August 19, 2021. Opinion: this is the world being left to us by adults. The New York Times. ISSN 362 4331. Retrieved 2022 5. Thunberg, Greta, October 2022. The Climate Book. London, United Kingdom. Allen Lane, Penguin Books. ISBN 978-0-241-54,747-2. Hardmap. Further reading. Nelson, Camilla, Vertigen, Meg 30 September 2019. Misogyny, Male Rage, and the Words Men Use to Describe Greta Thunberg, The Conversation climate activist, No Gray Area for Survival interview. Interviewed by Christiane Amanpour, CNN. 1 February. Zanalo, Bob 24 September 2019. Who is Greta Thunberg? The 16-year-old climate activist from Sweden. Hero mini documentary portraying Thunberg by Great Big Story. YouTube. Make the World Greet Again, a Vice documentary that follows Thunberg and the organizers of the school strikes for climate as they are cementing a worldwide movement ahead of their first global protest that took place on 15 March. Times Person of the Year article on Thunberg